And I want my elementary students to be excited about art. I want them to remember the feeling they had when they were in my classroom. They're not necessarily going to remember everything about the elements of art and the principles of design or anything like that, but they're going to remember that they were allowed to be creative, that they were allowed to express themselves, and you just don't get that from here. Cut this out and paste it here and then draw a face on it. Like, you get it from, okay, so think about where you want to put this. Why do you want to put this there?
Welcome to the Superintendent's Hangout, where we discuss topics in education, charter schools, life in general, and not necessarily in that order. I'm your host, Dr. Sharetta. Come on in and hang out. In this episode, I had a conversation with Mary Shannon Heinzelman. Mary Shannon is a longtime arts teacher at Albert Einstein Academies, is an artist in her own right, and we touch on a range of topics from the role of art and aesthetic appreciation in school to the integration of art throughout the curriculum and its connection especially to science. Mary Shannon's journey from the East Coast to the West Coast, the chance meeting with individuals that led her on her life's journey, her gratitude at being able to work in an area that she truly loves, that's seamlessly integrated into her life. The role of technology, some of our shared laments about technology in society, and so much more. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did sitting down with Mary Shannon Heinzelman. Greetings, Mary Shannon. Thank you so much for coming in this afternoon and hanging out for a little bit.
Thanks for having me.
I was wondering if you could start with your origin story. Just tell us who you are, where you come from, what brings you to the present moment.
Well, I am originally an East Coaster. I grew up right outside of Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia. I am the youngest of three girls. My dad was in the military, and so we traveled a lot when I was very young. Lived in Japan and Spain, and then when he retired, we settled in Falls Church, Virginia, and grew up there. And I loved growing up there because we're so close to D.C. and the Smithsonian and all the museums. And I can remember family trips down to the mall and seeing the National History Museum and the Natural History Museum, and the National Gallery of Art. And that was sort of a part of our lives growing up. So I really appreciated being so close. I mean, I didn't even realize that you had to pay to go to museums until I was older because the Smithsonian is free. It's a wonderful resource. But I grew up there, and
then you grew up. And then...
Well, let's see. I ended up going to college at James Madison University in the Shenandoah Valley, beautiful mountain town in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Was an art major, and I've always loved art. I mean, my mom used to tease me that she could never throw away a toilet paper roll or paper towel roll because I'd always make something out of it. In fact, to this day, I don't like throwing them away, and I probably have like 14 crates at school ready to create something with them. But I was always making stuff and drawing stuff, so art was always a really big part of my life. My dad's family is artistic in the sense that they're very musical. My grandmother was a concert pianist. She worked for Irving Berlin for years. And so music was always a really big part of my life growing up, musicals and Broadway shows, things like that. So we would always, I can remember my dad calling me up like, Mary Shannon, get up here quick. You got to see this. And Fred Astaire would be tapping away on the screen. So that was arts, and music has always been a really big part of my life growing up. And so I have a real appreciation for that. And I still love going to see shows. I mean, there's all kinds of arts, right? And definitely influenced what I grew up to become, an art teacher.
So you and I met, I think, it's a long time ago, so I could be fuzzy on the details, but I seem to recall that one summer or one vacation, you were painting a mural in the front office. You're painting something on the wall, and I think it might have been before you were the full-time art teacher.
So you know what it is? I think that was actually my friend
Oh,
who
see,
is
that's
what
how
linked
fuzzy I
me
am. There we go.
to the school, because my friend Heather Peters.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
She so when I moved out to San Diego, I guess my husband and I have been out here 21 years now, and when we moved out here, we didn't know anyone. I mean, we moved right after 9/11 and the anthrax, and then the shooter that was going up and down the East Coast, the sniper. Do you remember that?
I do.
And it hit our gas station that we go to, and my husband came home and he's like, "That's it, we're out of here," right? So he is a big golfer, and he used to work as a naval contractor, and he would come out to San Diego a lot on business. And so he said, "Well, we can go out to San Diego, or we can go to Florida." He wanted to move someplace warm where he could golf all the time, and it's like, "Well, I've been to Florida, so let's try San Diego." And we moved out here and didn't know anybody. And so I decided to take a class at the Museum of Art, because I said, well, I want to meet people that I have things in common with. So I took this painting class, and Heather Peters was actually the instructor of the class. And we became really good friends. And in fact, she's probably how I got almost every job that I've had out here in San Diego, because I started working for the San Diego Museum of Art, doing their Girl Scout programs and summer camps and classes. And then I started working for Monart, the drawing school up in Solana Beach, and then the Carlsbad Gallery. These were all jobs that Heather had, or when they had a position opening up, she would always kind of bring me in. And so Heather was actually the one who, when Libby contacted the Museum of Art, Heather came out and worked with a couple grades, I think, and did that mural.
Okay, that's what it is.
Yeah. And when she left, that's how I met Libby at her studio, going away party. And Libby and I started chatting, and was like, she was saying, "Oh, we're looking for an art teacher." I'm like, "Well, I'm one." And that's how I kind of landed at your feet.
And that's all pre-social media.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to reflect on how friendships and kind of things in common lead to other things. And fast forward, that's more than, 17, 18 years. Yeah. And you're still here.
Yeah.
So you now, teach art full time, and have, I think, went back to school and got a credential. And because I remember you were an artist and a practitioner of, but then to get into the schools, there was a circuitous route, credentialing, et cetera, right?
I would think it was just transferring from Virginia to California, because I was credentialed, like that was my major in college. I was in art education. I had my student teaching back east, and so I taught back east for a while, but then I kind of let it slack, because when I came out here, I wasn't necessarily working in the schools. I was at the museums and the galleries and private schools, things like that. And so in order to get it validated in California, I had to go through all those hoops, which I'm glad I did. It was worth it.
Now that I've gotten all the details wrong that I remembered, it is a long time ago. So
it has been a while.
It was interesting when you said 9/11, all those things you cite, it seems like 50 years ago.
Right.
So I'm going to just jump down to a question that always comes up for me when I think about and observe really dedicated educators teaching in areas that are kind of non-traditional. They're not really the 3 R's. And oftentimes people refer to them, I think wrongly, but as enrichment or the specials.
The specials.
The specials.
Because we're so special.
Which is great to be special, but it does kind of have an implication of being an add-on.
Yeah.
Right? Would you like to add guacamole? Would you like to add avocado would you like a special? So how do you view your role in a school organization, and your role in the curriculum, your role in the program, your role in relation to IB? You're a professional. Yeah. You're an expert. How do you see that and navigate that in relation to your peers? When I think greater society, conventional wisdom still sees art as an add-on.
It's really too bad they do see it that way. And I'm hoping that is starting to change. You really have to advocate for yourself. And being sort of the lone art teacher at a school, it can be kind of isolating. So having colleagues that support you and you can bounce ideas off is really important. And one of the things that I love about our school is that we have teams. And those teams, I work with each team. And we work with the curriculum, and as they're developing their IB units and concepts and all those things that go into that, I then pull pieces that I feel can really enhance the learning, that can really elaborate and expand on it. And it gives a different perspective for kids. You know, we have so many different types of learners. I'm a visual learner. And so I need to see things, you know.
It would be tough if you weren't, right?
I know, right? But I gotta
but I'm
feel
really an
things.
auditory learner. Okay.
But I gotta feel things and see things and work things out. So there is a lot of trial and error. I've definitely had some projects that we've tried that have blown up in my face, and that's one of the things I also like about IB is that idea of reflection and continually that growth. I'm constantly learning how to be a better teacher. Like, how can I, at the end of a lesson, how can I make that better next time? I mean, I do have to teach a lesson 6 times, each class in the grade, and
which is kind of a gift.
It is really nice. I sometimes I always feel bad for the first class I teach because they're like my guinea pigs. Like, well, let's see how this works. But then we work out the kinks, but working with the team and collaborating, I think, is a really important part. And so. To advocate for that and to really have a voice, you got to speak up and say, this is what I need. This is what I'd like to do. What can we do to, and luckily most of the teams are really supportive of that. And they are excited about doing it because they don't necessarily have that skill set. So to bring that into the classroom, the majority of the time, they're very excited about that. And so that's a plus in our environment. And the IB looks at art as a core subject that is part of their whole model. And so I think that because they are more internationally minded and they have a broader perspective, perhaps that is something that they're realizing is really important. I've heard interviews and talks with people where they talk about how science and art are so connected. And, if you took one away, then you would lose the imagination and the creativity that a scientist needs in order to think of new possibilities. And I think back, I feel like that's always been the way I've thought about art. As one of my favorite classes in college was, and this is, a long time ago before this was the norm, but art through art across the curriculum. And so our whole class was trying to, develop art lessons that could teach science or English or math or different concepts. And so I think that to me is how I've always viewed art and so IB just lends itself to that. It's really a positive match.
One of the things that I've been very impressed with in your work is the public art installations. Looking at spaces outdoors or sometimes quasi outdoor indoor because we're in San Diego, and so we have a lot of those indoor outdoor spaces, and the art that you've brought to those spaces, often using recycled products and those sorts of things. One of the things that I reflect on about education, I've talked about on previous episodes, and I've been open about the fact that, my daughter attended a school for a number of years where aesthetics was a focus, intentional focus in classrooms, and so Waldorf school, and they, the teachers do chalkboard drawings once a month, I think, and they're always thematic. Every teacher does one, right? And they take hours. They come in on the weekends and they do this thing, and it's connected to what they're teaching. And that's clearly not a common theme in public education. So much of what we see in school, this isn't a criticism of Einstein, but so much of what we see in general is prepackaged stuff, right? Like somehow in the teaching profession, we're supposed to have bulletin boards with construction paper on them and then little scalloped edges around, and we're supposed to put up live, love, laugh, and motivational slogans.
Sure.
And of course you got to have your standards, and then you got to have something that says, keep trying until you succeed, all those
Sure.
things. How do we bring an appreciation of aesthetics and creativity and a real attention to detail and in the way we view the world, so that things aren't just prepackaged? Does that make sense? Like, so I see you do it inherently in the art that you bring to a campus, and the projects you do. How do you? I guess let me rephrase my question. When you go into a classroom that is designed or decorated in a way that you would never decorate as an art teacher, how do you kind of integrate yourself in there so that you're not just seen as, okay, kids are going over there to work with Mary Shannon, they're going to do a bunch of exciting stuff, and then they're going to come back here for the quote unquote real academic stuff?
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking me.
How do you bring art in a way that's real and authentic to a profession that historically has not integrated art into what happens in the instruction of the day? And I think that is one of the reasons that art teachers and art programs are traditionally seen as enrichment on the side.
Yeah, not like the little craft projects is what you're saying. Like a lot of times you see that, and I veer away from that. I want to find art pieces that inspire my kids. I want to make connections, because when I think about art, I think about how that's a human experience. When you go to museums, or even if you don't go to museums, you walk around. Like we just did a mural walk in North Park, and there are so many murals. My family and we did this scavenger hunt kind of thing. Yep. And there's so much public art around San Diego. We really do a fantastic job in this city of murals and things that, and those kinds of experiences are what, when you look at a piece of art, whether it's on a wall in a museum or it's in the outside on the sidewalk or your electrical box or whatever it is, you are connecting with it on a human level. What do you see? What are your experiences? What can you connect? So to me, art is what brings our shared humanity together. And that is sort of part of our mission statement, right? But that is why art is so exciting for little people, they want to share it. They want to share their experiences. They want to tell you what they think or what they see or what they feel. And so I always try and find projects that inspire. If I'm inspired by it, then I'm going to transmit that excitement and that to my students. And I love it when they come back and they're like, oh, I taught my mom how to do this project when we got home, or I have parents coming. I'm like, oh my gosh, this kid is drawing, this over and over and over again. It's so exciting, and they told me all about this. Or if I have the excitement for it, then that I feel like transmits to my students. And I feel like those sort of crafty projects are great for in classroom with your general ed who may not have a background in art. But I want to expose them to different materials and different ways of looking at art, different cultures and different, processes, and get them excited. Because when I think about elementary art, now I never had an elementary art school teacher. I had a music teacher, but I didn't have an art teacher, and probably until middle school, probably. Right. And I want my elementary students to be excited about art. I want them to remember the feeling they had when they were in my classroom. They're not necessarily going to remember everything about the elements of art and the principles of design or anything like that, but they're going to remember that they were allowed to be creative, that they were allowed to express themselves. And you just don't get that from here. Cut this out and paste it here and then draw a face on it. Like you get it from, okay, so think about where you want to put this. Why do you want to put this there? Whatever it is, whatever element we're doing. And so I think transmitting that excitement and that shared connection is something that broadens the art experience.
You talked about, making it relevant for children from different backgrounds. Can you expand upon that? I mean, we have a very diverse student population on a whole bunch of different levels, both socioeconomically. You may have someone who's been to Paris, to the Louvre, and then you have another student in the same classroom who hasn't yet been to the ocean in San Diego and doesn't know what a starfish looks like in the real world, and everything in between. How do you think about designing your lessons with that wide range in mind?
Well, the bonus of being part of the IB curriculum is that that's somewhat built into their units of inquiry, the idea of exploring other cultures and other traditions and being very respectful of that. And I'd say the majority of 98% of my lessons tie directly into their unit of study. So it lends itself very easily for that, for sure. But then I also try and have a lot of visuals. If I can have something like real in front of them, that's better for me. I want them to be able to feel it, touch it, look at it. We just did shells with second grade, and I was amazed at what they picked up on those small little details that I can show you how to draw a shell, but you look at this shell. How would you draw this shell? And having their experience directly there in front of them, it connects that a lot better. And also, I really try and be aware of, when I'm picking artists to focus on, that it's not all, white guys who lived 100 years ago. And while those are great, I love Van Gogh and Monet. Yep. I'm a huge fan of those guys. But there are also a lot of contemporary artists that are living and working today that I focus on. And I like to have, videos of the artists talking about their work. So they're actually hearing from the actual artist. And we don't get to hear from Van Gogh about, what he saw and what he was feeling. We can guess a lot, and, a lot of intellectuals can tell us what they think happened, but hearing from artists that are in LA working today, or, that are on YouTube or whatever, and have a video talking about their inspiration and their process, I think that brings it more to their current, this is their world, and this person is still living in this world, creating. And so I think bringing those variety of artists, and as well as variety of types of art. There's so much in the art world. And I'm just talking about visual arts, but there's performing arts, and there's musical arts, and there's the design and the architecture. Art is all around us. Yeah. It's in everything we look at and do. It's how someone designed the water bottle you're drinking out of, or the clothes you're wearing, or the car you drive, or the house that you live in. These are all creative thinkers that created this. These are all artists that were given an opportunity to think outside the box. And now we get to surround ourselves with that, which is cool.
You and I were talking, we were reminiscing before I hit record about, because we're from the same era, age-wise. I don't want to give it away, but it's a while ago that we were born. And so we grew up before the proliferation of screens. Yeah. We grew up before iPads were babysitters. We grew up before iPhones were ubiquitous. It's certainly in developed world. Have you seen a change in your time as an art teacher with the proliferation of screens? Because now you're teaching students who don't remember a world before portable screens.
Right.
And I often think, I looked the other day, I have tens of thousands of photos in my Google Photos account. I'm so embarrassed by the number. But ask me how many I really have printed out and take the time to look at.
Remember when you actually had to wait for film to be developed?
I have a bag over here of photos from when I lived in Central America 31 years ago, and I have hundreds of photos in there. Most of them are blurry and terrible and whatever. There's a few gems, at least for what I'm looking for. But that bag cost me probably $1,000 of developing.
Oh wow! And
remember that, right? You used to drop it off, and sometimes you would have messed it up, so the whole thing wouldn't work, or your fingers in front, and so now it's instant, but it's almost like in its in this sense that it's so instant, it's lost some of its meaning. So have you seen some of that, even in like kids' appreciation of reflecting on what a flower looks like? Because they could just pull that thing up and there's 10 million photos of a flower.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of two sides to that. While it's you can look at it as wow, you have all these images at your disposal to look at as reference, and that's great, but do you take the time to sit and look at the details and things? That's true. I definitely have noticed a change definitely in the last 10 years for sure. Their attention span is is shorter. It's easier to sometimes show them. Easier is not the right word. It holds their attention a little bit when you're showing a video as opposed to talking about it with people. I definitely think that it can be used as a tool, but I think they get too distracted. They don't have the bandwidth to last.
For my weekly staff video that I send out, I get metrics on how long people watch the video, like the average amount of time. I can't say who did it, but I can see the average viewing time was this, right? And it doesn't matter what time of year it is. It doesn't matter if something really spicy has happened or not. It's just about 6.5 minutes. The viewership drops by like 50%.
Really?
And that's adults. And that's part of ostensibly someone's work.
Yeah.
Right? And so, I mean, the open question, the rhetorical question is, has this affected all of our attention spans, right? To the point where, there was no email to get an email from my principal when I started teaching, but you'd get maybe a newsletter in your mailbox and you'd kind of look at it as you were drinking your coffee or whatever. Those days are gone. We're inundated with interruptions all day long. Mm-hmm. And I've had a lot of people who would say, even to those videos, well, I don't have time to watch them.
But they have 10 minutes to scroll on their
phone.
And
look, in all honesty, like the videos could be bad too. Like maybe I'm not that interesting. But assuming that there was something of interest, you're like, wow, a week, just 7 times 24 times 60. There's a lot of seconds in a week that you can choose to allocate, right? And it's just an interesting reflection on how we spend our time. When I was in college, I'm not artistic, certainly in visual arts or anything, but I took an art class. I had some extra credits or classes that I could take at the end of my senior year. And it was an introduction to drawing. It was one of the most powerful classes because first day of class, very soft-spoken teacher goes, okay, everybody draw a tree. I'm like, okay, I think it was like charcoal pencil. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking this is easy. Wow. And I draw this thing and I'm done and I show him and he goes, is that what you see when you look at a tree? Or is that just what you have in your mind? Mm-hmm. Right? And he goes, now we're going to go outside and you're going to go and sit next to this tree for an hour and draw what you see and then come back in. And of course, I'm eventually looking at the texture of the bark and the way the light hits it and all those pieces. And I'm wondering, have we lost some of that as adults and children, right? Contemplating nature, it doesn't have to be outdoors, but even the way the light's bouncing off the door frame right behind you, right? Like, do we stop enough to look at that, or do we just all get on our devices?
Well, I would like to think that we do take that time, but I don't think people do anymore. I think you make a valid point. I mean, how many times do I look over and we're watching something on the TV and my daughter's on her phone and my husband's playing a game on his phone at the same time? I'm like, how can you possibly see the facial expressions of the comedy, or how can you see the timing and you're missing the whole experience, I have that same discussion with some of my students when we do, when I studied Georgia O'Keeffe. That was one of the things that she one of her quotes was something like, I want to make busy New Yorkers stop and take a look at this flower. Like, I
Right.
want them to take the time to look and to really see. And so when we do that lesson, I do the same, like, all right, everyone draw a flower. And they all draw like a little circle with little daisy
Yeah.
petals all the way around. I'm like, I know what you think what a flower looks like, but
Right.
let's look at this flower. How many petals are there? What shape is the petal? What are the patterns on the petal? Like, it takes time to really see. And artists need to slow down and take that time. And as an artist myself, I like that time. I like that reflection and observation, and I try and instill that into my students when we start a new lesson. Like, well, I know what this is, but what does it really look like? So I think that's a valid lesson for any art class.
And I think where you talk about the intersection of art and science, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't have scientific observation or in any discipline, you can't look at something and already in your mind have jumped to a conclusion without actually really consciously observing what's there and what's not there.
Yeah.
I know what that is. Wait a second. Is it really what it is? And I think 149 characters and tweets and Fox News and MSNBC, none of that helps.
No. I mean, we live in a fast-paced world. We live in a very fast, lots of information coming in at all times. You've got social media, you've got your text, your TV, your movies, your streaming. You've got 49,000 channels, and you can't find something
Can't
to
find
watch.
anything.
So we're inundated with this technology and this information coming at us all the time. And so I do worry that kids won't take the time, like that they'll lose that ability. So that's another reason why it's so important to have art in the schools, because they have a chance. And like I said before, everyone learns different, and there's kids who just don't, succeed in math or science, but they really excel in art. And there are kids who don't excel in art, but they have fun doing it. And that's what matters. They're taking the time to express and get that physical, tactile creation going. And when I go around the room and I look at what all the kids are doing, I get really excited about what I see, and I try and really look at each kid's art and pick something out of it that's like an honest comment, not just, "Ooh, that's nice."
Right.
I mean, that's great.
Beautiful.
It's great to say, "Ooh, I love that. That looks great." But like, "Ooh, I love how you use those colors. Ooh, I love the way those colors interact together. How did you do that?" Or, "Ooh, I didn't think about that." So pointing out those specific things that they would never necessarily, they're just going to rush by it. But to be mindful of that and to point it out to them, then they start thinking, "Oh, well, I'm going to experiment more with those two colors. Maybe that's going to be, So I think that's sad that we do have this sort of fast pace, but I think that's why art is so important, because it does take it to slow down and really think and look and observe and reflect
And
on
feel.
what is in front of it and feel. Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned a couple minutes ago, you mentioned a number of artists. Who are some of your artistic inspirations, and how does that manifest itself in the classroom and in your teachings?
Well, if I think about
Or schools of art.
yeah.
Yeah.
I of course, some of my favorites I always like to bring in as lessons, because if I'm excited about it, they're going to get excited.
Sure.
And Georgia O'Keeffe is one of my faves.
Santa Fe, New Mexico,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Have you ever been out there?
My family lives there.
Oh,
So
really?
every time I
Okay.
go, I'm like, I get it.
Have you gone to
guys.
the museum?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
it's
like, I
beautiful.
get it. We're going to see.
Have you gone to Abbey Q, her home?
Yep.
I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
we're super
awesome. And
excited.
you can see from the landscape
Yeah.
just like where the inspiration came from.
And I love all of her collections. I'm a collector as well. I have, rocks or stuff, sticks and stones and things that I collect. And she had them all on her thing. I love that. But I definitely bring in my favorite artists that I like as inspiration, like Modigliani. I like his style of portraiture. I tend to use a similar style in my own personal artwork in terms of the linearness of his faces. It's funny because a lot of times I'll be like, "Ooh, I'll do a new lesson. I'll be like, oh guys, I'm so excited. This is one of my favorite artists. And they're like, you say that all the time. I'm like, well, because I love art. Like there's so much that I love about it. And there's so many different styles of art. And I love that Andy Goldsworthy, that getting the environmental aspect of that and using the actual land as a canvas. But I'll tell you what really inspires me that I bring into my teaching is, and here we are talking about social media again, and I actually put off getting on Instagram for a long time because I'm like, I already have Facebook. I don't know. I waste too much time anyway. I don't want to. I'd rather be in my sketchbook, or I'd rather do something else than be on. But then Shayna got me onto Instagram, and I kind of hate her and love her at the same time because now I waste so much time looking at this scroll. But I follow these art teachers that are all over the country and doing amazing things in their classrooms. And that inspires me. And I'm like, ooh, I'm going to try something like that in my classroom.
Right.
So I like the idea of colleagues. I may not know them personally, but to me, I'm calling them my colleagues because fellow art teachers. And there's a real great community of art teachers sharing ideas and things that are exciting to do in the classroom. And so I do pull a lot from what other teachers are doing. Because I think the social media aspect of it, while it can be overwhelming, it also has a lot of positives to me as well. Like getting those inspirations and being exposed to another way of doing things. Oh, I've done a project like that, but this is another way of trying this. I'm excited about this. So I bring that a lot into my teaching, but I mean, I just want to share what I love, and I love art.
Do you paint and draw and outside of your teaching?
Yes,
for
I
renewal
do.
And for learning and.
I try and at least sketch in my sketchbook every day.
Wow,
because
good for
it
you.
really it first de-stresses me.
Sure.
And second, I feel the only way I'm going to get better at my art is to practice it. And I try and tell that to my students. Like,
Right.
I'm not expecting you to pick up your pencil and draw the Mona Lisa. I can't draw the Mona Lisa, and I've been drawing my whole life. Like,
Right.
You know?
Right.
But the only way you get better is to practice. And I've noticed when I have taken time away from my art that I get cranky and I start getting down on myself. Like, I can't do it. I'm not that good of a painter, whatever. I'm like, but
You start making
you know,
loopy flowers.
whatever.
Everything's a daisy.
I mean, I can't remember who said this quote, but it was like, inspiration exists, but it has to find you working, you know? And so I love that idea of, I'm going to try new things. And the more I do it, the better I'm going to get, or the more ideas I'm going to get.
Right.
And so that's exciting to me. So yes, I work a lot in sketchbooks, actually. I probably have about 10 or 15 sketchbooks that are different sizes and for different mediums. And I go from sketchbook to sketchbook. And
the students know that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I brought in my sketchbooks to
great.
share with them when I'm working on something.
Because I think, you'd like to think in a perfect world that a literature teacher is doing a lot of reading on their own. That a math teacher, I'm not saying they should just go home and churn out a bunch of math problems, but in a perfect world, mathematics and mathematical thinking is an active part of their life. So it's not just an abstraction they teach and then they shut it off at 3 p.m. and they're done. And so to keep it alive, and then for students to see, wow, this person's striving.
Yeah.
It would be terrible to have a PE teacher who never worked out. Right.
Right.
I'm not trying to cast aspersions, but right. And so I think that keeps it really active and alive.
Yeah.
I remember one of my good friends growing up attended Rhode Island School of Design in Providence.
Yeah.
And I remember, and we were in college at the same time. I was in Maine and he was in Rhode Island. And so we'd visit each other and he'd go, oh my God, I can't believe you have to read all these books and write these essays and all this stuff. And I'd say, I can't believe that you get these projects and then you have to go and do critiques in front of your peers.
Yeah, those are tough.
And I can't think of anything more terrifying. And he's going, the most terrifying thing for me is to have to read those sonnets and write an analysis of Shakespeare. I'm like, that's a piece of cake compared to this. So it's interesting the different ways that we learn.
Sure.
And I think to be able to cross over, right? We should ideally have both of those experiences and many more, right?
Yeah.
To get out of our zones of comfort as well.
Sure.
I think that I don't, if kids are working on their art at night, late into the night at home in their sketchbooks or whatever that looks like, I would hope parents would be happy and say, wow, that's schoolwork. It's meaningful, rather than, when are you going to start your homework? When you stop doodling?
Yeah. I love it when kids come in, because I do front gate duty. And so when they come in the morning and they're like, oh, let me show you what I did last night, Mrs. Heinzelman, and I'm like, oh, wow. And it's not necessarily what I taught them, but they're in there in practice. I'm like, I'm so excited that you're doing this. Yeah. You should do it every night, draw in that sketchbook,
Yeah, my mom recently took up watercolor painting, and she lives in New Mexico, so she's got an endless palette of opportunity. And I think there's something really meaningful. Most of us are never going to create something that would be gallery worthy unless we own the gallery. But there's such deep value in that. I think that's really one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. What do you do for renewal, personal renewal, outside of your teaching? You teach, as you said, the same lesson 5-6 times. You, the average listener is not going to know, but you have been an absolute trooper in throughout your career as there was in early days at Albert Einstein, the art program was seen as such an adjunct that every year we would raise money, and you would kind of be going to the gala wondering if enough money would be raised for your position. Now, luckily, we changed that. I don't think. Thank you. In retrospect, that was not. No one should have to go through that, especially for what I consider to be one of the core academic areas. But you've faced having to move classrooms, teaching in a multi-purpose room, being an ambulatory teacher, waiting for a bungalow that has never arrived. All these different things. It can't be easy. You love what you do. You love the kids. But how do you recharge your battery so you can keep going?
Working in my sketchbook, creating for myself. I find like when I spend a quality, good chunk of time creating for myself, I get excited about doing it with kids. I get excited about going back to school and sharing and seeing what they can come up with. Obviously, I with a family, I have a daughter, and it's when she was younger, it was a lot harder to find that time to get into my studio and create. And but when I'm a better person, I'm a better mom, I'm a better wife, I'm a better teacher. And so when I feel
you're a better freeway driver.
Well, I did grow up on the East Coast, so
I
do
me too.
know.
Me too.
I know I don't like driving in the rain, but I know how to drive in the rain. But so I think it's find what I like. Going to the beach, walking. There's something about the ocean that's very healing,
negative
and meditative,
ions,
right? I can remember when I first moved here to San Diego. We lived down in PB, and just walking out my door and being able to walk up and down the beach and sit, and the sort of magnitude of the ocean is something that sort of puts things in perspective too for me. I don't know. Finding time to do yoga. I have sadly been lackadaisical in that. I need to get better about that. But I always feel better when I'm taking care of myself, the things that I enjoy and love and bring me, energy. That's always helps me replenish and get ready for those little people walking through my door.
What does the 50-year-old sorry, I outed you, but you're younger than I am. 50-something-year-old.
50-something.
50. What is the 50?
I'm happy for every year I've had on this planet.
Hey,
right?
I am too, and I'm like,
I hope to have many more.
I'm like, see these wrinkles? I earned every single one of them.
Right.
These gray hairs.
Happily
too.
done.
Happily, I'm good. I'm moving forward.
Yeah.
What does the 50-year-old you tell the 20-year-old you, if you can?
50-year-old me tells the 20-year-old me. I'd say the first thing I would tell her is to breathe, to not look at all the little things, to look at the bigger picture, because you can really get bogged down with all. And I get stressed very easily, and I got to learn how to de-stress. And so, technology drives me crazy, but I didn't come from a generation. I mean, I still don't have a personal computer. I only have my work computer. But I didn't get a cell phone until I was in my 30s, and I tell people I work with that and they're like, what? Like, well, they didn't have them.
They didn't have them. I'm the same. Yeah.
So I just feel like I would focus on breathe, not worry about the little things, but focus on what it is. I think maybe I kind of took a little circuitous, I don't know how to say that word. Circuitous.
Yeah.
Route
around Hazel Baker's barn.
Yeah. To where I am here and where I'm, and I should have stayed focused on that probably. I took a little detours here and there. I thought maybe I took a break from teaching for a while, and I thought, well, maybe I'll paint murals and I'll do some faux finishing and that kind of stuff. And I realized I am not a business person. That is not where my strength lies.
Doing murals for free is just not a great model.
I'm like, this is, sales and, marketing. It's just not me. So staying true to who you are, I think, is the best advice you can give any younger self. Not stressing. You got a long life ahead of you. Enjoy every day. I hope I still have a long life ahead of me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say stay true to what your passion is and find a way to make it work. I'm one of the very lucky people, I think, in this world that loves what I do. Right. I love my job.
Right.
And I don't know if I love that I can make money doing it. I can make a salary and not everyone can say that.
That's right.
Sadly, my husband is not going to be a professional golfer. I know he wants to be, but I know he's probably going to give me a hard time about that one.
John.
Sorry, John.
Your wife just showed me some videos of you playing golf.
He's an excellent golfer. I'm not saying he's a bad golfer. He's
but
an
there's
excellent golfer.
And then there's PGA.
But he's not going to get paid for it,
Right.
And wouldn't it be great if he could?
Quite the opposite. He's going to have to pay for it.
Exactly. But wouldn't it be great if he could? And I'm one of those lucky people who am able to do a job that I am passionate about and something that I love.
Yeah, I think it's that very cliched, but also very true statement that if you do something you love, then you won't work a day in your life.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
Obviously they're the grind days, but in general, right? In general, to think that you can kind of blend what you do for renewal with what you do to put food on the table,
right?
And it's pretty seamless. How many people are just waiting and counting down to a retirement date or...
Oh, John's got his retirement clock ready to go. It's going.
On the computer?
He actually has a clock on his desk.
Really?
That
digital?
Is counting down. It's a digital clock that counts down until his retirement. Of course, now we're going to have a daughter in college soon, so
you're going to have to go in at night, and when he's out playing golf, you might need to reset the
right. He'll retire before I do. That's
with
for
the cost
sure.
of college. Yeah, and it doesn't mean he doesn't like what he does for a living, but so many people are that way.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's one reason you and I were talking about, because you're a big music fan, and we were talking about these rockers that seem to just stay around forever.
Right.
Like, well, Sting and Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger's like
who knew Keith Richards was going to last this long, right?
Mick Jagger is 200 years old and he keeps having kids and all this stuff. And but they're doing something that. How can it feel like work when you have 100,000 people cheering and you're jumping around and you could sing anything and they're going to cheer, and you could stay in shape and put the leather pants on and, and I think we see a lot of artists and performers who just keep that going. Mm-hmm. You don't hear, Brad Pitt's going to just tap out because he's 55. Like, come on, man. He's going to just start taking the distinguished gentleman roles and keep moving forward.
Yeah. I always kind of think I would like to be like there's an artist who I love, Alma Thomas Woodsey. She's or almost Woodsey, yeah. She was a middle school art teacher for her whole career in DC, and afterwards she started painting for herself more, and then got a solo show at the Whitney, and now her painting was hung in the Obama White House. I mean, it's like not until she was 60 did she start.
Right.
Like I see all those. There's some of these things where they say like, well, so and so didn't get their first hit until they were
Right.
45, and I mean,
It doesn't work with golf, though.
it doesn't work.
Sorry, John. You could play on the senior circuit.
I can see him, doing the golf cart thing and like the starter, after he retires, being the starter at the golf course.
That's right.
kind
or
of
he
thing.
could be a
But,
golf pro at a.
He could do.
He could do that. That's
could do it.
Yeah. Sorry, John.
I know we're riffing on you.
We're riffing on you, but it's okay, John. This is the guy who asked if this was live, if he could tune in and listen. So it's okay. Not everybody's in the moment with the technology.
Yeah.
It takes all kinds. Mary Shannon, you've been very generous with your time, and I realize it's a long work day, and we just had a colossal storm a couple of days ago, so we're all kind of like, what was that? And
What was that?
What was that? And wow, is it going to come again? And it seems like it won't, but we never know. I have one last question for you, but before I get there, is there anything that you'd like to add? Something that's been kicking around in your head? Any ideas that you're just like, I may get back to that, and but I didn't give you enough space?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think one of the things I gotta give props to the Prop 28 giving California arts. I've heard a lot of
Governor
good
Newsom,
things, that are coming this way. So I'm really excited to see how the arts can be expanded in California. I like that we're taking it ahead, ahead of all the country, really, in that, and honoring and valuing arts in our schools and with our students, because we need it. Art is, think about it. Art, since the beginning of time, this is how we reflect, reflect ourselves and our culture.
Cave paintings.
Cave paintings and, all kinds of things. And throughout the ages, where would we be without the Renaissance and architecture and all of this? So I am excited to see how this will change the art scene in schools here in California, because it's so needed. I agree. I hope the rest of the country follows suit.
I completely agree, and I think, Charlie Munger, who was the number 2 investor for Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger just passed away. I think at like 99 or something. But he always said, if you show me the incentives, I'll tell you what the result's going to be. And I think when you feed art and arts instruction into that machine, there is no incentive in schools, no measurable incentive. There hasn't been one to focus on aesthetic beauty. There's been no test score that's going to generate some outcome that says, wow, you're doing better in this area. So it oftentimes, even physical education's got, statewide tests. You can kind of, whether they're relevant or not, how many minutes you can hang on a pull-up bar, but it's something. And art hasn't had that.
No.
And so, it's always been and will continue to be a priority for me at Einstein. And I think the governor and the lawmakers who pushed that proposition have that in mind. And, we hear about STEM and then STEAM, so they added the A.
Thank you.
They added the A, but I haven't seen a lot of examples of where that A really comes to life.
Yeah. Well, it's so important because there's so many studies, you quote a zillion of them, but the arts are teaching critical thinking and creativity and problem solving. And those are skills that transcend art. You need those skills in science and English and history and all kinds of things. You want innovation, and you don't have that unless you are taught how to be creative, how to think outside the box, how to, be a critical thinker and observe and reflect. And those are skills that are taught in every class in art. And I think that's why it's so important that we do have those in the schools, starting from elementary. I think back and I'm like, how did I not have an art teacher in elementary school?
Yeah.
But I didn't. So I hope all schools will.
Yeah, I completely concur. So my last question. Normally I ask people this in the context of a bumper sticker or a billboard, but you're an arts teacher, so I'm going to ask this. You get to do a mural.
Ooh.
You get to do a mural.
Mural.
You get to do a mural, but it's going to be in a super prominent place, like, I don't know, like the side of a cliff on the side of the freeway where
God.
thousands of people
Pressure.
every day can see it. You can write something on it or you can just have an image on there. But what does Mary Shannon's mural have on it to convey your beliefs, a message you would like the world to know about the way you see things?
You're going to make me think of this on the spot, huh?
Of
A
course.
whole image right up there.
Or you can just write, you could take the shortcut and just a red dot on there. You could be modern art.
Modern art,
You just threw a blue balloon of paint on there. No.
Well, you know, it's funny when I think about things like when I look through my sketchbook, I have the same kind of themes running through my sketchbook. I have lots of I love trees, figures, you know, and so I immediately gravitate to that. But that's not necessarily something necessarily that I would want on the side of a mirror, on the side of a wall someplace. I think something that would tap into creativity and all that it can bring us. So some kind of image where you're having all kinds of different peoples and activities and elements from our world. Just if without creativity, these would not be here. I mean, think about it. If you didn't have creative people in this world, how much would not, like, our arts and culture would be gone.
Be gone.
No movies, no TV, no music, no dance, no anything, you know. And that's just the sort of performing arts, visual arts, that kind of thing. But that's not even dealing with all of the architecture. And so art touches all our lives. So maybe that would be the tagline perhaps. But the visual imagery, I would want people to see how that creative expression has been created in our world.
Well, you've certainly touched the lives of hundreds and probably thousands of students in your career. And so on their behalf, I want to thank you. And I've always valued the art installations that you have had on our campus. And so looking forward to many more years. And so thank you so much, Mary Shannon, for taking this time this afternoon and coming in and hanging out for a little bit and sharing your life with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Superintendent's Hangout. You can follow me on Twitter at DVS1970. Please be sure to share this show with friends and family on social media and in the real world. Thank you to Brad Bacayal for editing and production assistance, and to Tina Royster for scheduling and logistics. Thanks for hanging out, and have a great day.